that, well, we're defining business's missions in two ways. One is, and we're using mission in two different ways. Business as your personal mission and calling, and it's not a second-class calling. The second thing is business as a means to go cross-cultural, including cross-cultural in a setting local, and in a setting that's not just going between rich and poor, but also across cultures in terms of international, but also across cultures from Christian to non-Christian. And a simple thing on that is most of us are, if you think just in just a brief kind of understanding of mission, we used to think of mission as you go someplace, right? And that to some degree had some truth in its definition at that point. But when you think about mission, the theology behind that in short is that God is on mission, right? God is always on mission, reaching out. And so even in the creation of the world, God was extending behind the Trinity to be on mission beyond the Trinity. He does not need us. He does not need to create anything. God is totally self-sustained. But he goes on mission essentially to create the earth. And even before the fall, he's on mission to redeem the earth back to its purpose, and each of us to its purpose. So each of us as humans, even before the fall, we're on mission to accomplish something of value as stewards of the earth, to take something that had limited and take it to higher value. That's a mission. And then as Christians who are in the kingdom of God, who have accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior, we're on mission to extend that good news out to other people. And so when we say we're on mission, it's part of the character of God, the character of God's work on this earth even before the fall, and the character of God is exhibited through Jesus and through us as believers. So mission actually is a term that has theological background. Business's mission is actually basically doing what God wants you to do, utilizing business. Okay? And it's a calling as well as extending outward. Another thing in terms of just evangelism, there's an interesting video, if you're interested in this concept. There's a woman named Rosaria Butterfield, okay, odd name, and she has this interview, but she's at John Henry's College. And you start off and there's kind of a goofy guy that introduces her, and you're going, this is horrible. And you have Marvin Olasky, which is not his best interview, we'll put it that way. He's kind of up there, kind of stumbling around. And then she starts talking. And basically, she is a professor in Syracuse who is a professor of English. She was a lesbian at that point. And she starts talking about her conversion. And this is not about, I want to get into the whole sexual thing, but it's her conversion of saying, when I was in this worldview, I was a vegan, I love the environment, I grow my own herbs, my garden in the background, English humanities thing. So when I announced I was lesbian, everybody kind of went, makes sense. That's just kind of fits the cultural worldview. No big deal. Nobody was surprised. It was just part of the world. And so then these church people came up, and I kind of wanted to do an anthropological study. So let me go kind of study these people that live on Mars, right? And so interested, curious, open, not antagonistic, but kind of more of an interesting curiosity thing. And when they talked about Jesus in her worldview, not just lesbianism, but the whole worldview of the milieu that she was a part of, it just made no sense. So Jesus is my Savior, made no sense. Jesus loves me, made no sense. It just, the worldviews were so different. You could talk Jesus, of course, the power of the gospel could break down anything. And so what ended up happening is she tells a story how she was invited in as kind of just curiosity, but she had to be converted to understand and value a worldview before she could understand the message of the gospel. And it wasn't about hearing the words, it was about having an understanding of a worldview, a bridge, so that the words had meaning to them. Right? And so then later, somebody stands up in the audience and goes, what do you say? Gays are born or are they made? And she goes, you know what? I'm not even going to answer that question. Okay? Because frankly, it's irrelevant to what I'm talking about. In my worldview, I had one view. In your worldview, you have another view. What is true? I have a belief on that. I think the Bible says something on it. But frankly, in this conversation, when you start throwing that thing at this worldview, it just makes you seem like you're from Mars. Engage in conversation. Be open to be aware of truth defined in this worldview is not biblical truth. And so you have to have a conversation understanding the basis of the worldview. So when we talk about business as mission, you are often in a business setting where you're actually bridging worldviews. And part of your job, and when I was in certain places, my life verse was shrewd and innocent, right? Shrewd is a serpent, innocent as a dove. You have to exhibit certain business behaviors and have to exhibit that shrewdness in business. But you're doing it with innocence. And what's happening is you're taking people that would think normally Christians would have nothing to say to you. And you're creating a bridge of worldviews. Not giving up your biblical background, the thing that anchors you, but also recognizing business's mission is sometimes just serving in a business, having daily conversations with people, connecting them in a relationship, so after a while they go, man, I have never gotten the Jesus thing, but I get you, and I trust you. Could you explain the Jesus thing to me? Because you seem to make sense. You talk, you do some things that are different, but you also make sense, and you bridge worldviews before you can express the gospel. So business's mission may be on mission in a company that people look exactly like you. In my case, they part their hair and they got the button-down collars. But we're on mission because their worldview is so different. And just serving and relating in the midst of that is actually business on mission. So let me stop at this point. So it's not business as missionary, and it's not, it's business as a calling, it's your mission, but it's also a business crossing cultures, including crossing worldview cultures, not just poverty and not just international. Does that make sense? Does that seem to apply in terms of what you're looking at? So let's talk about how you do that then. One of the things, and sometimes it's talked about in terms of how you create a business that's a business's mission. And I know we've used the 3 bottom lines. Let's talk about it. Sometimes there's 4 bottom lines. Let me explain why. You'll hear this thing, and then of course somebody else is going to, well, there's 5, and there's 6, and Trump and 7. But I think the 4 are actually important. So you'll hear profit, people, planet, and purpose. Okay, there's 4. And the idea behind that is you're thinking, first of all, you need to have profit in order to sustain the business. And that's important. You need to have people that you're taking care of the people inside your organization. That's important because but you're also taking care of customers. Customers find value in what you do. Planet, you're not destroying the planet. You're at least sustainable in the fact you're environmental neutral. And then purpose, you're accomplishing something on the earth that would make a difference on the earth. And that you're making society better, the earth better as a result of it. Which understand what we shared before about calling stewards of the earth. So Dennis Bakke comes along and he goes, that's a bunch of bunk. And so Dennis is one of our founders. His language of love is arguing. And so, which I love him. I mean, he's always right, frankly. I've been arguing with him at the end. He's right. So he's just amazing. So this is the guy who planted a 40 billion market cap business, right? It's kind of large. 40,000 employees, 36 nations. Okay, and he's pretty controversial, very controversial. And the way he is controversial, one is he would say when his business went private to the public, he said to Wall Street, I am not going to change the purpose of my business. It is not profit maximization. If you're going to invest in my company, I've got it all over my offerings. We're not changing its purpose. Its purpose is to create safe, reliable, and clean electricity, primarily in developing countries. We recognize that in the developing countries, there's about 5 key areas they need to get their economy going. One of them is substructures and infrastructure. Electricity is huge. A grid is huge. You're going to change that. So that you don't need a grid anymore. So he's out of business. He moved his business. So he said, my job is to transform the world. So when you invest in my company, don't think you're investing for profit maximization. It's that, Wall Street didn't know what to do with that, and Richard Bayless took it down a couple points because they rank these IPOs. So he said because he's so stubborn on his purpose, we're going to knock it down a couple of points in terms of a valuable investment. He said, I don't care what I do. The other thing he did is he said, my company's job is to give away decisions. And so we have 40,000 employees. How many people do you think you would have in headquarters if you have 40,000 employees? So you have one headquarters in Washington, D.C. Typically, what would you think a company would have if they have 40,000 employees spread out? It would be 400. 400, okay? That's actually slow. Yeah. 100, okay? And Wall Street's going like, well, how in the world can we endorse this company because you're out of control? Okay? And the other things he says is we don't do human resources departments. We have no human resources departments. And so Jeff Pfeiffer, who teaches human resources at Stanford, has a case called the case of the missing department, right? It's still, actually, he still uses it. Harvard has a couple of these too. And he basically said, the reason we don't have a human resources department is how can I make decisions about salary, about policies and all that when I am in Washington, D.C. and my employees are in Bangladesh, okay? So my job is to give away those decisions. And then he would go, when you heard the theology behind it, he would go, theologically speaking, he would say, if made in the image of God, follower or non-follower, Jesus follower or not follower, you're made to make decisions. My job is to create an environment in a company which you are connected with how God made you. Now he has accountability structures called the advice process. The book Joy at Work describes some of that. But it just freaked people out. Why is he spreading this all out? But the people that worked in it really loved it. So what he's trying to do with that, but he comes across, and you'll see this in chapter 7 of his book, and he describes it really well. He goes, if I am using the balanced stakeholder view of business, and the balanced stakeholder is what is often taught in business school, and you say the purpose of business is to balance the views. So you basically want to serve the customer, the vendor, the staff, the government, the shareholders. And so the idea of you don't exist for profit maximization, instead you exist to benefit all the stakeholders in the business. That's the balanced stakeholder business. So he goes, if I make the very best decision, if my team is CEO, the very best decision will equally offend every one of the stakeholders. Because think about it. The customer really wants you just to give away the product, right? And really, okay, that's what they would really like. The management would like you to charge as high as possible for the product and give most of the money to management salary, benefits and all that, The employees would go, no, sell it for a really high price and don't give management hardly anything, don't give any dividends to the stakeholders, give it all to us, right? And so when you say employees first or customer first, what are you really saying, right? And then stockholders go, no, operate out of sweatshops in China. We don't care about your people. Charge the customers as much as you can. We want dividends. We want investment. We want our return on investment. Government is going, charge as much as you can, but we're going to take some taxes out of this. And so a balanced stakeholder view is basically trying to help every stakeholder get their part. And he says that's a disaster. And there was a case that happened in American Airlines some time ago. There's a guy named Don Carty, who was the CEO of American Airlines. He actually lived next door to my mother-in-law. And so we had younger kids at that point, and so we had Easter, and we're good Christians, so we do bunnies and eggs, right? And so anyway, we had the eggs out, and so he put eggs out in his front yard, and my kids are over there getting their eggs, and so I'm stop, because they don't know. And I go, no, the bunny said, this. So anyway, I'm sitting there with him, and so he sees that, so he brings his kid up, sitting there, and he goes, so how are you doing? He goes, well, I'm going to get fired this week. And so I've been reading about it. And he goes, so here's what happened. He's trying to do balanced stakeholder. So he's working deals, right? American Airlines is one of their times, and you read about it several years ago. But basically, he worked a deal with the stockholders, because if he doesn't work the deal with them, the value of his stock goes down. He doesn't have money to keep the thing alive. So he keeps going. But one of the ways he worked the deal is he didn't take away his management bonuses. Because if you take away the management bonuses, they will leave. The stockholders invest based upon superheroes inside the organization. It's just how the stockholders work. And so he went to the labor unions and said, I can't take away management bonuses. If I do that, our stock value is going to be gone and we lose everything. Went to the vendors, got reduced prices. So the labor union leaders said, okay, we understand that that's how life works. And so, but let's try to hide that. Well, it didn't get hidden. So then the labor rebelled. The labor union leader said, no, we didn't strike that deal. And of course, then he's a sacrificial value. And so the point being is he tried to create a balanced stakeholder view and got caught, right? Tried to negotiate the deal, negotiated every deal except for one that fell apart. And so he's sitting there in pain. And so he'd do Dennis. We talked about Dennis's deal. He goes, my next company, we're going to do a Dennis Bakke thing. We're not going to do this balanced stakeholder because this is just miserable. And so what Dennis would say is the job of the CEO and the management team and the leader is to actually put purpose ahead of the other three. Okay? And what you're doing is your job, and this is what we talk about transformational leadership. And it's contrasted. A transactional leader is somebody, in contrast, who says, you have an agenda, I have an agenda, let's work a deal so it's a win-win. You get your agenda, I get my agenda. That's a transactional leader. And that's a lot of what a balanced stakeholder view, and I would say not a business's mission view. You're trying to work a deal for everybody. A servant leader is often miscommunicated. Because I don't really think sometimes the way we define servant leader that Jesus is a servant leader. Servant leader is often miscommunicated as an enabling leader. You have an agenda, I have an agenda. I will sacrifice my agenda for your agenda. That's not what Jesus did. And that can be miscommunicated. And so because of that, we come up with another word, and I'm sure next year we'll come up with another word. But for now, it's transformational leader, which is you have an agenda, I have an agenda. I will first sacrifice my agenda because I understand that God has a higher agenda. I will lead by sacrificing mine first, and then I will have skills by my example and by my words to motivate you to sacrifice your agenda for God's agenda. And the way Dennis would describe this is why purpose in the 4 P's is higher. He would say he calls everybody to an equal sacrifice, not looking at each other. So are you giving up as much as you're the vendor and I'm the customer? Are you giving up as much as me? And you're the laborer, or you're giving up as much as me. Instead, he's going like, look, all of us sacrifice. I'm calling you to sacrifice everybody to a higher purpose. And my skill is to communicate that higher purpose is worth the sacrifice and call everybody to it, including myself. And so when you think about the 4 Ps, you really are basically saying people, customers, and employees, you need to sacrifice for them. When you're talking about the profit, to have that kind of a business, you probably may not have as big of a profit. And even the planet, and we'll talk a little bit about that, you may do some things on the planet that would not be as good for the environment, but you're doing it in a balanced way. Now we'll talk about, because this is a little controversial, but you're recognizing what does it mean in the larger picture. So example, one of our board members is a guy named David Sarah. Okay, he used to own 1 million acres in Tierra del Fuego. Okay, largest producer of white asparagus in the world. And so he came in and he wanted, as an example to the world of what a balanced approach to the environment would be, he bought 1 million acres in Tierra del Fuego. And he said, these are fragile lands. We know that these forests are, it takes 40 years for a lingua tree to grow in this forest. Some of these are totally uncut forests, never had anything done in these forests. Surrounding this are very impoverished communities. I would like to, by having this 1 million acres for the first time in the world, is to show how to do sustainable lumbering in a full ecosystem, because he does lumbering all over the world, including a lot of land in Seattle. And so basically he took this business risk to make a statement. And so if you hear it, there's actually a book written up that talks about the 7 key environmental decisions that have changed the whole world of environment. The one is Lennon's Park or Forest. This is chapter 7. And the way the writer writes it, it says, at the point when he was able to do whatever he wanted to, he stopped and said, I will not lumber this until we have a full ecosystem environmental plan. The government did not force that. Nobody forced that. And he says, we don't know if he was just a horrible business person or was trying to make a point. The minute he did that, he created the plan that everybody else has followed. But all of a sudden, environmentalists started jumping because he showed weakness. And then he finally got the Greenpeace, the international environmentalists looked at it and they said, now that we've jumped on you for 5 years, stopped your development, which he bought the land really cheap. And so he knew that he was going to run into this, not as much as he ran into. But he said, finally got all the international environments, but then the local environments. And so finally, after a period of time, got interference by the government of the United States in some really odd ways. He went ahead and sold all the 200,000 acres. And they're making it into a park. So now, but he said, he noticed my plan was cutting 1 out of every 4 trees every 40 years. The way that would change the whole economy of that area would actually empower people. I want to make a statement that when you say guard the planet, it's not leaving it alone. There's a difference. It is utilizing the planet in a balanced way to benefit the purpose of the organization and the people, as well as the profits. And so that planet is sometimes sacrificed in the way sometimes we define environmentalism, leaving it totally alone. but doing it in a way which actually is in balance, which for some people would argue is a problem. Dennis Bakke was the first largest carbon offset in the world, 1989, 3 million eucalyptus trees planted in Guatemala. Huge controversy, right? So he built a coal-fired electricity plant, as clean as it was back in Connecticut. In order to get that approved, he agreed that he would plant 3 million trees in Guatemala so it would offset the carbon offsets that were happening in Connecticut. And got it approved that way, okay? Okay, think about this. And so, and actually, if you look at the numbers, it would, theoretically, right? Okay? But it was mainly more about the point. First of all, it's the cleanest coal-fired plant they'd ever had there. Secondly, he wanted to make the point of if you're going to create CO2 emissions in Connecticut, you need to do something somewhere else to change that. But then he also, this is the controversy, he said, I actually paid farmers to plant eucalyptus trees in land they could not farm and was at that point had no forest on it. Eucalyptus trees are not native to Guatemala. Nothing grows in those forests, but eucalyptus trees do. They do acquire water and keep water, but the way the water runoff is it hits that ground, runs off, and so basically he was changing the ecosystem to the favorable. But he also said, if it's your land, I'm paying you money to do the eucalyptus trees. After that, they're your trees, right? Trees grew up, the people cut them, okay? And now the complaint is, well, now you're still doing coal-fired CO2s, but the eucalyptus trees aren't there anymore. He goes, they got money for planting them. They could do whatever they want to with them. I'm not going to control that. They now cut them and sold them. They got money for that. Do it, you know? Again, what's the balance? The purpose of creating safe, clean, reliable electricity is I am asking each person to sacrifice, but I don't make planet without balance. I don't put people without balance. I don't put profits without balance. We talk about people in our MBA program, we want you to learn how to create wealth. Well, wealth is not necessarily money wealth. It's also relational wealth, health wealth, spiritual wealth. And often, if you're trying to pursue one area all about money, you actually can't have the others. And then what happens is once you have all your money, you try to buy the other ones and it doesn't work because your kids hate you, you got bad health because you've been working too long, and so then it's the end. So you say at the beginning you think about wealth in a bigger picture holistically, which means you're going to sacrifice how it's been traditionally defined. The same thing as business's mission. When you think about the 4 P's, we would say you would put purpose as the one that you call everybody to sacrifice. And as a transformation leader, you change yourself first, and then you're about changing others. And then you think about the other 3 in a balanced way, not raising anyone up as an idol that you really get out of it. So let me stop at that point. Does that make sense? That's not how everybody teaches this. I know it has some controversy to it, because people tend to say people are more important than planet, planet's more important than people, profit is really more important, and we have all that out there. But we're trying to say, how does a business's mission leader call people to equal sacrifice, including themselves? So give me some pushback. How would you say that better? How would that apply as you just, and we're looking kind of theoretical now, we're going to get into that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What seems weird about that? What seems off?
Well, I can see a common argument, which you see every day, and that's trust. That whole concept of, okay, you do that, and then you do this for me, I'll do this in return, and then especially in the environmental element, there's a very low level of trust. So their basic mentality would typically be, you're right. So, which is essentially exactly what would happen if that row of trees were cut down later. The deal basically went sour at that point. 20 years later, theoretically,
according to the environmentalists, but according to the people,
right,
it's our property. It's our property.
So, but I do completely agree with the concept of having that common purpose, and I guess that's basically the finite issue is how to find that, how to hold up that purpose on a consistent basis so that everybody's willing to give a little and feel like they gave a lot, or feel like they got a lot.
That's a skill for the leader, the business's mission leader, to have personal trust. And in a case like David Sire with the land, he tried as hard as he could and he lost it. He lost a lot of money. And because he just never could build the trust. He's very good at it, but wasn't good enough in that situation. That's part of the complication of it. he would say it'd be better to try than to lose. Dennis Bakke lost $4 billion in a very short amount of time. What happened is his company grew because the electricity sector was way overheated. And he goes, we're growing because it's overheated because you have Enron and 3 others in the business. When Enron collapsed, Enron and 3 others collapsed, he was the only large electricity company that survived because he leveraged differently. He knew it was overheated, but his personal wealth just went way down. Of course, he was very generous with his personal wealth. And so what ended up happening is, so he would say, easy come, easy go, because he knew he came because it was overheated. And he said, rather than sell, he wanted to write it back down. And he would say, my message, and you see it in Joy of Work, is to give away decision-making power to employees certainly makes good business sense. To make purpose as higher level, it makes good business sense as long as you sell before the thing collapses, because it's our rights do this, our sectors do this. He goes, the point is, the fact I failed in the profit actually makes my message more powerful. And I would say you give away decision-making, not because it makes good business sense, because it's the right thing to do. And it was important for me to write it down because I wanted to make the point of you don't just build businesses to turn them. You build businesses to make a difference in society, even if you have to write it back down. And a lot of business schools teach, get value, sell it, get another one, get value, sell it. And what happens is you're not taking responsibility for the stewardship role of that business. You're just trying to get the money out of it. So it's, again, controversial.
Which defeats your credibility.
In business's mission,
yeah.
It really, that's business as, making money, really. So it's, but that's controversial. Business schools would say that's a ridiculous idea. That's just foolish. That's naive.
Of course, the stakes are much higher in the scenario you described.
A lot of zeros.
When you're operating outside of a normal environment, you're in a third world country, for instance. The odds are stacked against you big time. In Fresno, California, you can calculate your odds, and you can take those risks and have a much greater possibility that you don't have to write it down. Be my experience more often than not, you'll write it up when you empower people.
Ideally, yes, but it gets complicated. When you're only going after profit, it's actually a much easier business.
True.
And if you only go after environment or planet or people, it's a much easier business. When you try to put all these together, it's just hard work. And you get a lot of criticism because people are coming at it. But you're right. Ideally, to write it up. But Dennis has an interesting view on that. He would go, Jesus made his point by failing. And it's interesting. I don't know. My kids always, we have this conversation: is who's Good Friday good for? Okay, when Jesus died on the cross, was it good for Jesus? Well, no, bad day, right? You see the Passion of the Christ. That's a really bad day. Was it good for God the Father? Well, you see in the movie The Tear. I mean, that was the first time in all of eternity that we know of that God the Father and God the Son had to separate in community because of the weight of our sins. That's a bad day. Was it a good day for us? Yeah. Was it a good day for Satan? Not a bit. And we would look at it that probably, we don't know, but Satan obviously lied somewhere and said to perhaps the angels, or perhaps at that point, we don't really know how this works in the Bible, but we see that there's fallen angels. So he probably said, God doesn't have your best interest in mind, follow me, I really have your best interest in mind. So supposedly out of Revelation, some people say a third of the angels follow me. We don't know, but they're demons. And then we went to Adam and Eve and said, God doesn't have your best interest in mind, follow me, right? I did. All of a sudden, Jesus comes down, and in spite of Satan trying to keep it from happening, because remember with Job, he tried to have Job curse God by infecting his body with boils. Man, it's a last-ditch effort, man. All the stuff that you see in the Passion of Christ, Jesus still does it. And so at that point, when Jesus dies, you can see all the demons looking at Satan and going, well, wait a second. You lied to us. You said that God didn't have our best interests in mind. God just died for these puny humans. He has their best interests in mind. He is good. You lied. Your lie now is forever revealed. And later, 2 million years from now, 5 million years in heaven, some new creature is created. He goes, we know God's powerful, but you think God's really good? So let me tell you the story of Good Friday. And that has proven for all of eternity. Well, the same thing what Dennis would say is, my life vision is to communicate purpose. And to some degree, if I was always successful, there's a group of people that listen to me that will never listen to me when I fail. But when I fail and write a book about it and say it's still worth it, it has a different meaning. And it really impacts in a different way. We would say, I'm not Jesus, of course, but I think there's something about articulating a purpose, even when you fail, is important. And that's part of business's mission, by the way. If the mission is profit maximization, you messed up your business's mission. If the mission is to express purpose, be a personal example of stewardship, often the actual failure, well, that's not what you aim for. You're trying to do that, right? Bad business person. Is trying to, sometimes that's actually going to communicate business's mission. That makes sense. But you don't try to. Hopefully, the risks are contained, like you said. What's
Maybe Dennis in his spare time could come to California and help us with our draft situation.
I don't know, he's good, but I
I'm
don't
sure some people wouldn't like that. But no, have you ever heard of Mark Benioff, who has created a technology company called Salesforce? So he was in Fortune 500.
We have that software.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you? Okay.
We use the software, but I didn't know the guy.
It's Mark Benioff. He's in headquartered in San Francisco. He started the organization with a 1-1-1 rule. And it's 1% of all the profit, 1% of all the productivity, and 1% of all the personal time of every staff person in the world would be given away each year. He started that right out of the gate. So he's gathered together now the likes of Google. The chairman of Google was there. The second guy in charge of Facebook was at his conference. He's created a whole nonprofit sector, a nonprofit service sector, by which he distributes these 1-1-1 principles. And so the guy from CEO of Coca-Cola, Google, and all that are sitting in front of this crowd of 30,000 people. He brings up the person who heads up the cancer division in UC San Francisco, hands her a check for $10 million and challenges every one of them to use a 1-1-1 principle.
That's good.
Would that be a business's mission?
It is.
Or is
here's
it
the
not
thought.
planned?
Here's just a thought behind this. It really is. Except, just a little tweak on that. And now I'm glad to know that because I sometimes get mad at myself for it. So now we have to user error. Okay, so if I am not a Christian, but I'm made in the image of God, and I do something good, that's consistent with who I am, right? But I'm still not giving glory to myself. It's our battle. Is that business's mission? It's not. That's my definition. Because it's not connected to the mission of being a human in the image of God to be effective, to basically be under God's steward. I don't know if he's a Christian or not.
Yeah, I don't think
He doesn't necessarily have to articulate this is about Jesus. He could say, this is, but so it's business that flows out of the natural thing it needs to be in the image of God. But it may not be business as mission the way God is on mission. So for example, Chinese. We have a bunch of students in China that we train to prepare for disasters. This was some years ago. And so Sichuan earthquake happened, right? And so they were ready to go. And they moved in, 30 of them faster than anybody else did. They hit the ground. And they would say the great hero of the Sichuan earthquake relief was the government. And so, we have a very large church in Dallas, and they wrote a big thing, about we sent 3,000 tents to China. Look at us as Christians. We delivered these tents, and we're great Christians. Look at this. And so the Chinese are going, the government sent 3 million just in a little area. Why don't you guys celebrate the fact that the most Christ-like organization in this recovery effort is the communist government? They have no clue what they're doing, right? But they did it because they're acting consistent. So they said, you guys have this way of teaching evangelism. Bad news, good news. Bad news is you're a sinner. Bad news, you can't go to heaven. Bad news, you're, which is true. Good news is Jesus helped me. We do evangelism, good news, good news. Good news is when you were serving and relieved, didn't that feel great? Good news is, didn't there something about you that came alive as a human? It was like, that's your purpose, right? You felt more like a human serving and making a difference in the needs than anybody you've ever felt. That's good news. I can now tell you the good news of Jesus Christ, of why you feel that way, so you can pursue that in good news, right? It's a different way of evangelism. Same thing with the CEO. If there's a way that could be a good news story, I think then it becomes business's mission. I don't know that somebody operating as a non-Christian out of a sense of let me make a name for myself and feel good, acting like I'm human, but not giving glory to God, it's really not truly business's mission according to this. But I like the activity, it's just the motive.
Yeah, the second story, real simple. Just south of us, a gentleman named Bolthouse, Bill Bolthouse, created the little mini carrot. Ever eaten one of the mini carrots? He created it. He has a family. Each year, they would take a percentage of the profits of the business, and it ended up being $8 million a year. Gave it to 8 members of his family. Once a year they met, they determined that they would put that into kingdom stuff. So he goes to Cambodia, buys 100 acres, I don't know, thousands of pigs, hires these people, and funds it for 1 year, and also makes a self-sustaining macro industry. And he just go across the world and just do that out of carrots. So, again, is that business's mission, or is that just being?
It feels like
Sure.
it depends on his purpose and his mission. Again, mission comes from God.
Okay.
And it comes from those of us that are kingdom bearers.
Okay.
It sounds like it, but what was his motive and all that?
Yeah. No, he's a Christ, kingdom guy. So.
And he doesn't have to say, and we look at the tour guide. He closes his store, his chicken store, Chick-fil-A on Sunday to make a statement. And that's genuine who he is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to be that overt to do business as mission. Okay? And there's conversations that occur about Jesus in the midst of that, but you don't have to name your company Jesus Incorporated to do that. And so there's different ways that people are doing that. I think one of the things that we'll get, just one key principle on business's mission, which you brought up, is business's mission. Remember, not every opportunity is a calling. Okay? There's a bunch of needs out there. So the key as a leader of a business's mission, we talk about the 4 Ps, but putting purpose is higher than the other, and creating a balance. The other key is calling, saying that I need to act according to who God made me. And so there's a giftedness there. And so part of this natural giftedness, and we help students understand natural giftedness in a variety of ways. One of the best ways to do that, we have an exercise that you can meet in a group. It's actually called Motivated Abilities Profile. I don't want to have a weird name. Basically, you say, what did you do well, and what did you enjoy doing ages 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20? And you just tell stories. How did I get involved? What did I do? What did I learn best about? And you have good listeners, not your mama, she's got an agenda for you. And kind of have to explain what it was. And so when you operate a business's mission, it comes out of your natural gifts. It comes out of your spiritual gifts. It comes out of how God has shaped your environment. We use a thing called the 5 H's. What are the high times in your environment, hard times, heroes, heritage, and hand of God times. We do a life map on that. But business's mission doesn't come from just an opportunity. It comes from your calling. And your calling is often recognized through natural gifts, spiritual gifts, what happens in your environment, how God shaped it, but also opportunities God has provided. So business's mission is consistent with that calling. So part of it is, if I try to copy your calling, I'm really not doing business's mission because it's not coming out of my mission and my calling. And so that's an important distinction.
You gave some pushback right at the very beginning about how business mission is not business as a missionary, but if we're kingdom building and we're trying to do both Jesus' Great Commission and God's initial cultural mandate of, worship, work, relate, reproduce, and forgive me. How can we then, be missionaries and business people, say in a creative access country, etc.?
Great question. And when in doubt, do Romans 12. Okay. The church is a body. It has many parts. And you may say, my word, like the man that was sharing about the being a theologian and not a business person. You may say, I am really good at articulating and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. I am an influencer. I use my words. That's my calling. That's my gift. But I need to get in a limited access country. I cannot go in there acting like a business person because I'm not. Okay? But I can team up with a business person. And so as a team, because a business person naturally starts thinking about customer value, and we use the Drucker 5 questions. What's our mission and purpose? Who's the customer? What is the customer value? What's our strategy to accomplish that? And how do we evaluate? The Drucker's 5 questions. They just naturally are wired. And they're in a conversation, they go, we can sell this. We can sell this right here. And so what ends up happening is you team with people that are either from their story, their background, they're wiring from God, and you say, we together need to be an organization. Now, now, what happens is, so you create a viable business so that people in that community say, you're actually making a difference in our society. We would like to hear about one. But maybe your part of the business is going to be more of that proclamation. So what ends up happening is when missionaries try to go alone, or teams of all people who are proclaimers but not business people, they try to create a business that looks really funny. And it creates some issues of not being authentic. But when you're part of a team that's creating a viable business, you're now creating a viable business. And actually, you're part of the team encouraging, there's all kinds of things you're doing. You may have more overt conversations about Jesus Christ as their Savior than the other person on the team, but they've opened up the door and created the links between the worldviews to make your words make sense. So it's all about the team. So don't try to be something you're not. That's the point. So now you're part of business's mission, but most of your conversations are more proclamation about Jesus as Savior. But you're still business's mission because you're in a team that's taking it through.
You have 5 more minutes.
Quick. As we discovered our God-given purpose for our business, we discovered that became our governing and guiding light for all decisions. And where we used to look at a lot of decisions, and they all look good, now we look at decisions based on purpose and which ones look best. And the other thing that we discovered is that you were speaking about failure, is really discovered the true meaning of Romans 8:28, that God causes all things to work together for good. And we discovered in this God-given purpose that even in what we deemed as a failure or in something didn't work out, God would use that, and sometimes He used that to be the most powerful aspect of our business ministry aspect of it, because we didn't get the glory because, wow, we didn't do something really great, but God got the glory in how He used that for His purpose, which is the purpose that we have for our business.
That's good. That's good. Pretty good.
So failure can be, it changed failure can, there's a fun side of that. Because it's going to happen. And it's really neat when you see something good come out of it. And before that, we would just want to push it under the rug and say, okay, let's never do that again. And actually, God would use it to do a lot of good.
So I guess in summary for business's mission is really saying, I have a calling and a mission, and it's not second class to be in business. A pastor's calling is not a better calling. If your calling is to be in business, that's the best calling for you, right? And even when you say, I've heard people go, well, nobody remembers the Apostle Paul for his tent making. Well, that's because that wasn't his primary calling. I mean, that's a ridiculous statement, right? If his primary calling was tent making, in all of eternity, we'd go, that's Paul the tent maker, man. He did it well, you know. We're not going to sit there and go, when Paul walks in a room in heaven, ooh, he wrote half the Bible. You know, it's like, cool, you got the calling, God did it, you didn't. He's going, God did it, I didn't do it. You know, it's just that's not the way it works. And so what your calling is your mission. And in business, your calling is not second class. Second thing, when you pursue a business's mission, whether you're CEO or you're somewhere in the organization, think about the 4 Ps. But the way to prioritize purpose over the other ones is important. And making sure you don't lift anyone up as kind of the idol, as if it's untouchable, is important. You'll be in environments where different ones are lifted up, and sometimes you're going to have to be controversial in that environment. One of Dennis's controversy is if somebody didn't fit, fire them. Okay? Because he says, if I don't fire that person, I'm actually destroying everybody else and including them. You know, I want to do it in a good way, but the worst thing I can do, we had a pastor here, hilarious moment. It was a pastor's conference years ago, Booth character. And so, you know, he was sitting there, we were having this conversation with all these senior pastors from around the country in Colorado. And they were talking about how they gently kind of help people find out that this was not their job, church staff, you know. And so you know how you can get on this, you walk around, you go outside, come back in. So finally, half he just interrupted. So they were going on for 45 minutes, and somebody would go, I gave them this, and I gave them this. And they were kind of bragging to each other how kind they were. And finally, in this beautiful way, he would go, you know what? No matter what you give them, they're fired, you know. And he goes, the sooner you tell them, the better they can get out of there, you know. And just, you know, I know that it seems rude, but it's really loving. And so part of it is, again, don't put people up above so you never let them go. You want to do it in the right way, but you do it in a loving way, but actually letting it go can be the best thing for the purpose of the organization. So again, you can idolize any one of the needs. Another thing in business's mission is really think about your calling. And you really cannot understand your calling except in community. You take the gift assessment and you're a beaver or you're a golden retriever, that's great conversation. That's whatever that is. It's about having a conversation where you own it in community and you understand who you are and what you are, and more importantly, what you're not. Because the key to a strong business's mission is not overstepping and doing something that you're really in your limits. And it's that dependence upon other people that is very important to business's mission. And part of your calling is doing something to make a difference in the world that's consistent how God has wired you and called you, the opportunities, not just doing something because somebody from Texas came in and said this is an important thing to do. It's got to come from who you are. And you don't want to do it until you know what that is. But when you don't know, you just stay in community and figure that out. And I think the last thought is when you're doing business's mission, make one last point. Is think about it as a lot of times moving from a non-empowering culture to an empowering culture. And so in my environment, we're urban, and if I say we're trying to move to a sales culture, I'm just going to get so much feedback, it's just going to be goofy. And one of my chairman of my board for a while was the president of Nordstrom. And he goes, why can't you guys talk about the word sales? I can in my business school, but I can't in my urban school because they just react against it. And so we came up with the euphemism. Okay, it works for us. It's a mutual respect exchange culture. Now, think about what that means. It really means something. So we would say in asset-based community development, you don't come blowing in there to give people unless you've actually given them respect. They actually determine where the resources should go. Same thing in sales. And one of the things we say in urban ministry, if you want to meet somebody else's needs, you let them meet your needs first. Okay? Because now there's respect. I have a need, you have a need. Before I ever try to meet your needs, I'm going to be your student, you teach me. I'm going to be under your care, you provide for me. And then the relationship will be more balanced. Same thing with sales. When you're giving something away to people, sure, they like that, but there's a certain sense that you're also taking certain respect. When you're asking them to give you something, mutual exchange, it's got to be realistic. It may not be the value of the product, but a mutual exchange, mutual respect exchange culture. And so business's mission actually can be utilized, nonprofit or for-profit, in a lot of ways. Larry James, who says that, says when he took over a food pantry, he actually fired all the volunteers, okay, that came in from the outside, the suburban neighborhoods, and hired all internal people in the neighborhood. And the ladies that kept coming in go, well, that's bad because they could steal the cans of corn. He says, what's worse, stealing cans of corn or stealing people's dignity? Okay, and the same thing when we get into toxic charity. And so what's nice about business's mission is often thinking about the person you serve not as a person you're giving charity to, but actually as a customer. Using the word customer without any apology, saying, how do I serve you in a way that you give me something back in value, gives them a certain dignity. And so business's mission, even as a thinking in a nonprofit, even as a thinking in a charity organization, becomes a way of thinking that I think establishes certain values. So those are some thoughts. Thank you for your time today, and maybe some really good workshops later on this afternoon.